today we have among us Mr. Seemant Srivastav, who has over 20 years of experience in business strategy and operations and is the co-founder of Mool Innovation Labs. He's also a startup mentor and has provided guidance and consulting for numerous founders. Matangi, over to you.
So today he will be speaking about the basics of fundraising, and I'm sure he's going to give us a lot of valuable insights. So just going over the plan once again, Mr. Srivastav will be presenting his fundraising deck for roughly 45 minutes, after which we would have a 15-minute Q&A session. So all of you can post your questions in the chat box and we can take it up later, or you can also ask your questions towards the end of the session. So we're delighted to have you here with us, Mr. Srivastav. Over to you.
Thank you, Suhani. Thank you, Matangi. And I'll be just sharing my screen. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Can you guys see the presentation?
I think, sir, it's taking some time to load.
Not yet.
Yeah, so it's not visible right now.
Let me see. Is it there now?
Yes, yes.
Great. So, as discussed, I'll be kind of presenting this for roughly 40-45 minutes, and I would request all of you to post your questions in the chat box. We can take it up towards the end, or you could ask me directly also. And this is our agenda for today. What we will do is we'll cover typical stages of any startup in its life cycle. Also, we will cover what are the funding stages for these startups. Then we'll come to how to go about pitching your startup to investors. We will also cover some valuation aspects. And this is something which is I am kind of going over and above the mandate which was given to me by the IIT team, just to cover not only fundraising but also bootstrapping. And this is very important, folks, because not every startup gets funded. We must appreciate that. So let's dive into the agenda for today. And before we get into that, I'd like to start with a story. And this story is about the stone shoe. I'm sure many of you have heard about this story. There's the story of a European traveler who is traveling through the villages, and this is Middle Ages, as you can see from the graphic which is displayed. At that time, the connectivity was not great, the mobility was not great, and this fellow had just one big iron cauldron, and he was traveling from city to city, villages to villages. There was a point in time when he was super hungry and he arrived at a village. So he kind of knocked on a few doors, and unfortunately the residents shooed him away without offering any food or help to this poor traveler. So he hit upon an ingenious idea. He lit up a fire, put a lot of water in that, and put the cauldron on top of the fire, and put a big stone inside it, and just started waiting for somebody to look at it. Luckily enough, few passers-by who were villagers, they noticed and they inquired, "What are you cooking?" He said, "It's a lovely stone soup. And it'll come out really nice, but it has some ingredients missing." So the villagers asked, "What is missing?" He said, "If I could get a few carrots, that will be really helpful, and I'll share the soup with you." So this villager ran to his home and got the carrots. Meanwhile, some other villagers also came and they also inquired, and he kind of gave one ingredient to everybody, and everybody was promised a lovely stone soup towards the end. So everybody got some ingredients. Somebody got chicken, somebody got salt, somebody got black pepper, and so on and so forth. And at the end, there was a lovely broth which was cooked and shared amongst the villagers. What does this story tell? This story is something akin to an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur also has to go through this rigor of getting the right set of resources, the right set of people to build something which is valuable. If you see in our story, our uh, traveler didn't have anything except for that cauldron. And later on, he was able to cook a lovely soup and share the spoils with his benefactors. So, entrepreneurship is something similar. Now, that brings us to India. So, India, as you all know, is the startup hub currently. It is the third largest ecosystem in the world after US and China. And as of January 22, India had 83 unicorns with a total mind-boggling valuation of 277.77 or roughly 278 billion, you can say. Most of these unicorns are in the services sector, which constitute more than 50% of the India's GDP. And Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai are the biggest hubs, and between them, they host 68% of the unicorns and soonicorns. The hottest sectors are edtech, fintech, food tech, health tech, D2C, e-commerce, logistics, etc. But one thing which is hidden amongst these all headline numbers is 90% of the startups fail within the first 5 years of their existence. And this is really shocking. But I guess very few of you must be knowing the stats. And what are the reasons for failure of such startups? That is lack of innovation, weak business models, poor planning, faulty insights, lack of leadership or original ideas, agility, and tech challenges in terms of getting the right tech in place. It's not like the talent, but it's kind of execution, so to say. On the right hand side, you can see a graphic about gazelles and cheetahs. Gazelles are basically companies which are formed after the year 2000, and they could be unicorns within the next 2 years. And cheetahs are companies again formed after the year 2000, but they could be unicorns in the next 3 to 4 years. So let's start with our life cycle of startups. And a typical life cycle looks like this. Some of you must have seen this graphic. It is quite used in startup circles. Even if it's not seen by you guys, I'll explain today. So this graph you see is life cycle of any startup, and there's something on the left hand side which you see as a valley of death. That is the time when most of the startups are bootstrapped and are kind of managing with their own resources. That's the period when you are building a prototype or your MVP or your pre-revenue, and hence none of your investors are looking at you, because unless you have traction, unless you have a growth story in place, just based on an idea, there's very less chance that you will get some kind of funding. So most startups have to endure that valley of death, and unfortunately, in that valley of death, many of the startups don't survive because cash is something like blood for a startup. Without blood, as the body is not there, similarly, without finance, a startup cannot survive for long. So this is something which we'll cover to the later part of this presentation, and how to kind of manage during this initial period by bootstrapping. Once you have some kind of a prototype or MVP in place, you could receive some, say, angel and seed capital, which is the first round of funding which you'll get. This could be either through professional angel networks or angels, or it could be through friends and families also, or it could be through accelerators or incubators or government funds, could be anything. Once you kind of get into a faster scale up model, then the VCs look at you. You could be raising series A, B, C, and so on and so forth. There could be some kind of mezzanine funding, which is either known as venture debt also. And you could reach a stage when VC beyond, you could reach a private equity stage, or you could go for public market listings or IPO as they are called, and so on and so forth. But this cycle is the most difficult in the first 2 to 3 years when your startup is kind of trying to scale up and break even. After that, the execution part becomes easy. It's more about managing growth and growing fast. So, what are the stages of funding for a startup? A startup goes through typically these 5 stages. First, as I mentioned earlier, it is a bootstrap stage when you are managing with your own funds and you don't have much resources. Either it could be support from your friends and family, and that's it. Then you kind of move on to a seed and angel round wherein you could receive funding up to $1 million or even less than that. So $1 million would be around 7.5 crores of Indian rupees. That's the upper side, but typically the ticket size during seed and angel rounds could be as low as 20, 25 lakhs, 50 lakhs, and so on and so forth. After that, you reach a venture capital round. Here, the ticket sizes could be a little over $1 million, and it could be on a higher side up to 8, $10 million. And that's why there are series. So maybe you could raise in series A $3 to $5 million, and in another series B $7 million, and so on. And subsequently, you reach a mezzanine or a PE round because many companies which are venture funded, they also go in for a venture debt. That's more like a financial structuring. I'll not go too deep into that, but it basically gives you a tax arbitrage as well as it makes your financial results look good because debt is allowed, interest on debt is allowed as a tax expense. So many companies explore a venture debt option also once they are funded by venture capital. And final is the IPO or a public issuance. Not every company reaches that, but if you have raised VC money, there are only two types of exit for a venture capital. Either the company gets listed on the stock market or somebody else buys the shares of the VC because VC don't have a outlook beyond 5 to 7 years. So ideally, then they push either the promoter buys the share or they kind of sell the shares to some other strategic investor who can buy the company out. So that's, friends, is the funding stages cycle of any startup. We'll now come to the business pitch and how to go about pitching for your startup. So there are some checklists according to me. When you are going for pitching a business, you should first select a business which has scale and potential. What does that mean? See, India is a huge country. Today we have almost close to 140 crores population. And this population presents a unique opportunity as well as unique set of problems. If you are able to think big, think huge, and how can you solve problems for this big country, leveraging technology, then you are on a right path. Some examples of Indian models which have really kind of scaled up. I mean, take the example of Big Basket. It's now part of the Tata Group. But what they did, I had the fortune of talking to Ganesh, who was one of the earliest investor and founders of Big Basket. And he mentioned that when we were starting Big Basket, we thought that India is a broken country. We have bad roads, we have bad communications. And this is, I'm maybe talking 2010, maybe today the communications and road infrastructure is much better. But still, there are problems because India is still a growing and a developing country. But maybe 10 years ago, these problems were more profound, so to say. And that point of time, these guys thought that if a person has to get some groceries, he has to go through that whole process of going to a nearby departmental store. And I'm not talking about the Kirana wala aspect. We had these departmental stores like Big Bazaar and Hypercity and so on and so forth. So going to those places, clearing the securities, picking up your stuff, standing in a long queue, getting your billing done, then plugging those bags into your car or vehicle and then again driving back. So that was like really tedious process. And even I have been through these processes in my earlier years. But today All you have to do is go into the app, look at what you want to order, select everything, check out, and within a few hours or maybe next day, this whole thing is delivered at your doorstep. Seamless. Take the case of eating out also. Now you have the likes of Zomato and Swiggy, which have made our life easier. So you need not kind of, if you are just feeling like having outside food, you need not step out. That food can come to your home. So these are just simple examples. There are so many case studies, and I'm giving you urban examples. There are cases around rural problems also being solved. I came across a startup which has kind of leveraged this rice husk, which is generated as a waste and burned by the farmers, to be kind of used for generating power. So you have to literally think out of the box about ideas which has scale, which has potential, and which has a market. If that is there, you have to start executing, build your MVP prototypes and all, and then start looking for investors. At the same time, don't lose focus of your market and customers, because many times I have seen from personal experiences, I'm telling you, because investors you're focusing on, you lose focus of your customers and the business starts to suffer. Then that whole situation comes, as we say in Hindi, ki Maya mili na Ram, आपको ना customer मिला ना investor मिला. So never lose focus of your customers. That's one more thing which you guys need to bear in mind. Next is know your numbers. But that's very important because investors ask lot of pointed questions around your business, and if you are found wanting on your numbers in terms of what is your user base, or what is your active user base, or what is your cost of acquisition, or what is your average transaction value, these should be by heart with you guys. Next is you need to be honest about your strengths and weaknesses of your team, because many times there might be some shortcomings. You might have not have a proper skills within your team, or there might be not enough set of co-founders, so to say. If those questions are asked, you need to be honest and accept, yeah, that is a challenge, but you are working upon it. Next is you need to also be open to getting some good advisors to help you pitch. Advisors means it could be a merchant banker, investment banker, so to say. It could be chartered accountants who help you build business models, or advisors, management consultants. It could be legal advisors also, which will help you draft your legal agreements, shareholder agreements, term sheets, so on and so forth. Last but not the least, be ready to learn from rejection, because there are very few startups who get successful within the first few attempts. I have seen like startups which made at least 2 dozen attempts before kind of getting successful in terms of investments. So how do you pitch? First and foremost is be confident, because you are going to ask for partnership. You're not going to ask for arms. You're not a beggar. So what you are asking for is money in return of equity or shareholding for your company. So that's very, very important that you be confident. You are going to talk as partners, not as beggars. Second is, as I mentioned earlier, you need to be very, very honest about your business. Don't try to kind of gloss too much. Of course, you need to present the good facts about your business. But if you are caught on something which is a weak point, you need to be honest and accept. Third is need to be a very good listener. Many times I've seen that people in their eagerness to talk, they miss on some good points which the investors are wanting to make. And last but not the least, again, is you need to take critical feedback very, very positively, because many times there are insights for future improvements. Even if you get rejected, there are some good takeaways. It's not like failure. There are some good takeaways which you can work upon in your next pitch. So that brings us to this concept of elevator pitch. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, and I want to kind of take a pause right now and look at your chat box. You guys wanna type in how many of you are aware about this elevator pitch concept. Anything? I'm waiting, guys.
We can take 30 seconds, 40 seconds here. Till now, if anyone can't access the chat, I'll request you to join the team soon. And the team code is QE17AGG. Yeah,
You can
so if
type it
anyone,
in.
yeah, if I type it, the chat, they can't see it. So that
Oh.
doesn't work out well that way. I hope people are in the chat though.
So quickly, 30-second pause. Feel free to. There are some hands being raised.
Anyone
Sir,
want?
please. What?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did someone want to
Cool.
say something?
In the interest of time, maybe I'll just move on. But
So will it be okay if I say something regarding elevator pitch? I'm not sure, but
yeah, it's okay. It's not like it's not an exam that you need to be right. Please go ahead.
yeah, so I think it's a short description of your idea for the startup, so that the investor can get a grip quickly of what you do.
Yeah, so you are broadly correct. So it's basically the concept is like these guys keep, if you are let's say walking into a public place and you kind of see the head of any venture capital fund or any of the market bigwigs whom you know that they invest in startups, you can't kind of grab their attention for long. So the elevator pitch is like, assume you are in an elevator with some big shot who's an investor. How do you catch attention of that guy in a 30-second pitch, so to say? And why it is called elevator? Because elevator kind of takes you from maybe ground floor to wherever you are going in within 30 seconds to a minute max. That's why you should be ready to kind of pitch your story within that time frame. And this comes from practice. It cannot be like I saw somebody and I'll try to make a pitch. So I'll just first explain how this happens, and then I'll kind of give a pitch about my startup also. So I keep practicing my pitch that whenever I have to raise money, I have to go and pitch to some investor. I should be ready with my elevator pitch also. So I'll give both aspects so that you guys can appreciate that. So typically this works like, first you should quickly introduce yourselves, who you are, because without that, how does the person connect you to something? Second is you present what kind of problem you are addressing. Then you come to the solution. Then you come to the value proposition. What is the value add in this? It could be soft, it could be measurable in currency terms, it could be anything, but it should have some kind of tangible value. And last is the call to action, which you guys, especially who kind of understand digital marketing and all, this is something CTA we keep on talking about. So call to action is basically the next steps where you kind of try to either secure some kind of a meeting or some kind of next steps from the investors. It could be either he could ask you to send a mail or he could agree to a meeting. Depending on that, the idea is to kind of reach from zero to somewhere as far as elevator pitch is concerned. It could result in failure also, that's perfectly fine. But this is something you should practice, all those of you who are planning to turn entrepreneurs, because that will ensure that you are able to handle unstructured situations, so to say. So I'll quickly kind of give you a pitch example of my own startup, and that will help you put things in perspective. So if I kind of see some big hotshot investor, I'll just kind of walk up to him and say, "Hi, my name is Seemant Srivastav, and and I am a co-founder at Mool Innovation Labs. I'll take just 30 seconds of yours to present a situation. 20% of attrition in corporates is due to unstructured salary structure, whereas a cookie cutter approach is used to put all employees in certain salary brackets. We at Mool Innovation Labs have come up with an AI driven personalized finance solution which helps employees to design their own salary structure depending on their own financial requirements. And this has demonstrated to save taxes of employees by at least 10%, thus giving them maximum value for their CTC and ensuring that they stay happy employees and don't leave the company due to higher taxes or improper salary structure. Does that sound exciting to you? Then I'll be happy to take a meeting with you this Friday. Please let me know. This is just one example. It could be anything. So we move on to the next section, which is around valuation. And this is also very important that you guys understand at a concept level. Valuation as a field is very big. I am a registered valuer. I am supposed to be expert in this field, but I can tell you there are certain aspects which keep on coming every month, and even I have to keep on learning. So this field is very vast. That's what I can tell you. But at a conceptual level, I'll introduce you to certain aspects which you guys as entrepreneurs need to know. So what is valuation? So what I've done in this slide is I've put two definitions. One is I would say formal definition, other is a simple layman terms. The first one goes like valuation is a quantitative process of determining the fair value of an asset or a firm. In general, a company can be valued on its own or on absolute basis, or else on a relative basis compared to similar companies or other assets. What does that mean? That companies can be valued on their own means on the basis of certain projections, and on relative basis means when you compare one company to another company. The next definition goes like valuation is a value assigned to your business for investment purposes. It is a value agreed between a knowledgeable buyer, which is an investor, and a knowledgeable seller, which is the entrepreneur or you. So let's understand a few concepts around valuation. First is enterprise value. What does that mean? This is the value of your company or business as a whole. This includes not only the money which you have put in the company, but it could include external debt also, which is you might have borrowed from friends, family, banks, whatever. So all this put together on a fair value basis, and fair value means based on the potential of the business, because there's something called as book value. Book value means, let's say you have put a 1 lakh of capital and you have taken 50,000 as debt, and there are similar assets on the balance sheet. It could be cash or other assets. So book value of your business is 1.5 lakhs enterprise value, and net worth is 1 lakh. That's a simple formula, but that doesn't work in business because we are looking at a future value, not the historical value. So when we say enterprise value, it's based on the future potential. We arrive at the value of the business, and that includes both the debt as well as the equity. When we say equity value means what is the value of the equity shareholders based on again the future potential. So difference between the two, I hope you are able to grasp. In case there are doubts, I'll take questions. The third is pre-money value. What does that mean? It means before you have raised money from investor, what is the value of your business? And post-money value is nothing but your pre-money value plus whatever investment you've got from the investor. So if I have to explain with the help of an example, let's say the pre-money value of your business is coming to 5 crore rupees, and the investor has agreed to invest a crore of rupees, then your post-money value will be 6 crore. Also, in terms of shareholding and dilution, please bear in mind it is always on the pre-money value, the valuation is done. Now, these are some of the valuation methodologies. And I'll just at a concept level explain because these are too technical to be covered in a short duration. So first is a discounted cash flow, which is nothing but what you do is you project your business for at least 5 years and sometimes even longer. It could be 7 or 10 years. And based on that, you arrive at the free cash flows from your business, which is kind of mathematically derived by removing all non-cash items like depreciation, working capital adjustments, debt payouts, and all that. And then you kind of apply the cost of capital rate which you have arrived at to arrive at the present value of all future cash flows. And that is basically the business value, so to say. Dividend earnings and growth model is a slight variation of the DCF, wherein if it's a listed company and it's paying out dividends, or even if it's not a listed company but privately held company but paying out dividend, then based on the dividend payouts and the earnings growth, a valuation is arrived at. So above two are absolute or standalone methods. The third is a peer comparison method, wherein let's say I am a software company and I map myself to the TCS, Infy, and Wipro of the world, and based on their earnings multiples or sales multiples, I kind of arrive at the valuation of my company after certain adjustments for size, scale, businesses, etc. First, Chicago and VC methods are typically used by venture capital firms to kind of arrive at a back of the envelope working. They are not very kind of scientific, but they do provide a good idea about what valuation range should be. So first, Chicago has typically three scenarios: best case, base case, and worst case. And certain probabilities are assigned, and based on that, a total valuation is arrived. And VC method also works on a probabilistic based model, more like a decision tree, so to say, and arrive at that. Backsolve model is typically for very complex capital table companies which have raised multiple rounds or which have uh, uh, kind of securities which are in the nature of their values being determined at a future date. So convertible shares or debentures, so to say. So there are a lot of probabilities assigned to that, and hence it's more like a option kind of model, and that's why the Backstall model, which is kind of based on a variant of Black-Scholes, that's being used. There are other valuation methods also, but I have not covered it in here. We'll quickly come to fundraising and bootstrapping. So to get funded, my friends, you have to get these things right: the value equation, getting discovered, and being clearly understood. And getting two out of these three right is not enough. You need to get all three right. And there's something called as the value framework. Now, what does this value framework? So value framework, basically, if you move from left to right, first is the severity of the problem. Second is differentiating uniqueness. Third is validation proof. And fourth is operational scalability. So as we discussed earlier, India is a big country and there are big problems to be solved. So the bigger you problem you go for solving, the better it is. So severity of problem is that. Differentiating uniqueness means how you are able to differentiate from others. Third is validation. Obviously, you need to validate the whole model. And fourth is how quickly you can scale it up. Now, if we go down, the other pointers are in terms of what are the competing alternatives. If you are the fifth player in an already crowded market, let's say we have in this grocery, Blinkit, Grofers, Swiggy, Amazon, Big Basket. If you also come into the market, there's very less chance unless you have a deep pocket and a disruption potential. So there are examples like in a heavily crowded market, Jio came and disrupted the market because it had deep pocket and it had a better technology and it was discounting itself. And that's why it was able to kill the competition. But not everybody has that kind of resources at hand. In terms of disruption, we just discussed the example of Geo. It was able to disrupt the market. Customer acquisition is also very, very important wherein you need to acquire customer at a fast pace so that you are able to validate your business model, and that kind of brings you to the funding strategy. How do you get yourself funded? The whole market potential, your ability to create moats, and having a revenue model which is scalable, and finally your team capabilities in terms of are you able to complement each other. So many times in a tech company we see all founders are having only tech capabilities. That's something not great. You should have people who are having sales, business development capabilities. You should have people who are good at operations or managing the internal aspects of the business, and you could have a third person who's great at tech capabilities. If these three people are there, then that's like a more winning combination than having all people who are tech only or all people who are sales only. So that, my friends, is the whole journey of a startup in terms of the value framework. You start, you build value, you prove your model, and you finally get funded for growth. Now, this is another thing which I have kind of built, and you can say I have a copyright of this chart. So this chart on the x-axis, you can see there are the sources of funds. On the y-axis, it is kind of arranged on the cost of funds basis. So the cost of funds, higher the cost of funds, it will be more on the top on the y-axis. And you can see there are four types of sources of funds. One is equity, one is debt, third is a barter, and fourth is others. So equity, my friends, is a investment into your company, wherein the investor is taking a shareholding into your company. And if you see from the bottommost side, bootstrapping and friends and family are the most cheapest sources of funds because they will not ask for any returns. Maybe friends might ask, but they are also lenient in terms of allowing you a long rope. When you kind of scale up, then only they'll expect some returns. Then there is crowdfunding, incubators, accelerator, and within the brackets there are the returns expected from each of these investor sources is mentioned. And as you kind of grow up, venture funding or PE funding is the most expensive source. So many people want to raise venture capital, but they should appreciate that it comes at a high cost. Typically, they want to double their money in within 5 years, wherein they are seeking at least 20% IRR. On the debt side, there are certain government schemes. The CGT SME scheme is one of them, which kind of gives you loan between 8 to 12%, and it's without collaterals or security, so to say. So that's one of the best schemes in the market today. Then there is loan against collaterals wherein you give some security, either a asset or property or plant machinery as a security and borrow. Leasing is typically for assets which are being used as plant and machinery or equipments. Then there is TREDS, which is Trade Receivable Exchange Discounting System, which is a Government of India promoted technology platform wherein your invoices to certain companies can be discounted, and it's kind of a factoring only. So you can kind of get listed, put your invoice, the banks bid for it, and you receive your money. And the banks recover the money from the person who has been raised the invoice. Then there are venture debts we discussed short while ago, which are used by venture equity funded companies. SME loans by NBFC, P2P lendings, credit cards. Credit cards is something I never advise anybody to go because it has interest rates anywhere between 33-35% to on a higher side 42% per annum. That's you can't generate that kind of return from your business, so never put that kind of money into your business. On the barter side, as the name goes, you exchange certain goods and services in return for certain goods or services. So there's this form of investment of media barters which is used by in bodies like Times of India, Hindustan Times, wherein they give you ad space in return for certain equity. in your company. That has to be selectively used. I would advise this kind of option only for companies which are into B2C space and which are growing fast and scaling up fast. Otherwise, avoid that because it's a costly source. Then you can get some senior people to work for you or advise you and kind of give them some kind of sweat equity. You could take back office support similarly, office space in place of product or equity, and you can exchange resources with other startups. There are other options. Many times nowadays, now it's kind of norm. This slide is slightly dated, but we have all kinds of technologies available on SaaS basis, and it makes sense to go for a SaaS kind of solution where you pay as you use rather than taking a license for a year and so on and so forth. You could ask your customer for advances. You could also explore government grants and schemes, which we'll discuss shortly, and win prizes in contests, manage from your own revenues. Some of you who are very early in your startup can moonlight, I mean, working in the day and working on your startup in the night and get whatever free resources you can. So that brings us too quickly to the Startup India framework, and I'm realizing we are short on time, so I'll try to wrap up within the next 3 to 5 minutes. So Startup India framework is based on three pillars. First is the angel tax exemption, second is the DPIIT recognition as eligible startup, and third is the income tax exemption for startups. So first and foremost, you have to apply to be recognized as a startup, which is with the DPIIT, which is Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. This is the nodal body for registering all startups in India. The whole process is pretty straightforward. You have to go online and submit your application, and within 1 to 2 weeks, you receive your registration. The forms are slightly lengthy, so if you feel you are lost, take help of a professional. But if you feel you can manage, then go ahead and apply. Based on that, you could also apply for angel tax exemption. So once you receive your startup registration, you could go for angel tax exemption. What does that mean? That means like if you are getting investments from any angels or angel funds or accelerators, incubators, which are not really registered with the government, then these guys and your company is exempted from angel tax because there is a provision in income tax to prevent misuse of this route to convert black money into white and vice versa. That's why this angel tax exemption has been given to recognized startups. Otherwise, other companies are not allowed. Then there is this whole income tax exemption that has to be also separately applied in Form 2. And what happens is if you are lucky enough to receive that exemption, then you are not required to pay income tax for 3 consecutive years of your existence from the day you receive this exemption. So what is this criteria for recognizing a startup? So first is the startup should not be older than 10 years from the date of incorporation and registration. So if you are going for a registration today, your company should not be older than 10 years from today. The turnover of startup should for any financial year should not exceed rupees 100 crores. That's pretty simple. And last is it should be working towards innovation or development or improvement of products, processes, services, or on scalable business model with the potential for employment and wealth creation. So you have to kind of fall in one of these buckets. It's not necessary that you need to be falling in all the buckets, but if you are creating employment or you are creating wealth or your scalable business model or you are working on technology improvements and products and processes, you get registration. So it's pretty wide. Now, last 2 slides, since you guys are in Delhi, I have included one slide on Government of Delhi startup policy, and I have kind of one more slide from my home state, which is Maharashtra, in terms of what is the startup policy in Maharashtra. But actually, wherever you have logged in, each state government has a startup policy. All you need to do is search on the internet for, let's say, if you are in Rajasthan, Rajasthan startup policy, and you will find what all benefits are there. So Delhi startup policy, some of the salient features are they have a Delhi Innovation Hub through which recognized startups or entrepreneurs will be incubated for free or at very subsidized rates. Then there is general administrative support from chartered accountants for incorporation and compliance matters. There is another resolution of the government that 10% of their all procurement by Delhi ministries and departments will be through recognized startups, which is the DPIIT recognized. They are also giving interest-free loans up to 10 lakhs for the first year, and from second year it is 6%, which is again a very nominal rate of interest. Further, technological and financial assistance for patents for all startups. This is Maharashtra government's policy for startups and fintech companies, because Maharashtra being having Mumbai, which is the financial capital, they are focusing more on fintechs. So first is they are providing accelerator support with API sandbox and other support. What is API sandbox? It's basically a ecosystem wherein you can test your apps without risk of failing, which has linkages with RBI, banks, and other financial institutions, so as to kind of uh, reach a level wherein the whole prototype can be launched. You also get 6 months incubation and office space at India Bulls One Center in Parel, where they have a very swanky office. Hosting internet and electricity bills in case you are not using their incubation space, up to 3 lakhs per annum is reimbursed. And state goods and service tax and office rent reimbursement up to 4 lakhs per annum. Also, further technical and financial assistance for patents for all startups. So that's it, my friends. Thank you for being patient listeners, and over to you guys for questions.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful presentation. So there's actually one question by Navdeep, and he says, in case if we want to go for an investor round after touching a revenue number, so what should that number be when I can start looking up for an investment? Because I'm keeping this in mind that when I go for Series A, I must be having a good stake in my hand. So how to deal with this honey type of investment, and how can we make a smart choice?
So there are a few things here. First is there are no numbers prescribed, because these numbers vary from industry to industry. So depending on which industry you are setting up your venture, the numbers will be kind of determined by that whether it's the right time to go for investment or not. Second thing, my advice to all of you would be to delay the fundraising initially as much as possible, unless like it's kind of coming in the way of your existence or growth. uh, it's very swanky thing to raise investment and be very popular amongst friends. But the flip side is that investors come with a lot of control. And the other flip side, which you just mentioned, is you could end up with lot of dilution. So I would suggest it is only when you are very clear on your growth path and you're seeing month on month traction. It's not about, or not only about the revenues, but also you should be able to see a month on month traction or growth. Let's say you're growing 25% month on month or 30% month on month, these kind of hefty numbers, or even 50% month on month. Then there's a clear cut story for raising investment. If these kind of numbers are not there, you're growing maybe 5% or 2% month on month, then try to manage within your own resources. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so Sir Dipanshu has a request. He wants you to explain the difference between enterprise and equity value again, if it's possible.
So enterprise is the entire company value, if I have to put. So um, let me see. Do we have a whiteboard here?
Just checking the options. I don't think so.
Yeah.
You can
Uh,
you can share your screen again, I think, and you can type.
so I can't draw on my screen. I'm on a laptop. I wanted to just explain. Uh, so consider like a big box, which is your company, or let's say take this. This is your company. This includes your equity as well as debt. No, this is your debt. Let's say 30% is your borrowing from external sources. So if this is your enterprise value, if you remove the debt value, that is your equity value. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So,
There's one more question. There's one more question in the chat box by Shaivi Malik. She wants to know about the government grants. Is it necessary to be incubated in a government incubation center like Start India, Seed Fund, etc.?
Okay. So there's no requirement for being incubated in a government center, but yeah, you should get yourself registered under Startup India. There's something called as Udyam also, which I didn't cover. It's again a registration for MSMEs, which is micro, small, and medium enterprise. Again, it's a very fast process, 5-minute process. Please don't fall prey to consultants because there are a lot of fake consultants who say that we are authorized representative of government and they'll fleece you for money. You can directly go. All you have to do is put in your Aadhaar, put in your enterprise details, and within 5 minutes you'll receive a certificate from government. So Udyam is the name, UDYAM. Ideally, go for both registrations. Startup India as well as Udyam. Udyam also offers a lot of benefits, including subsidized electricity, loans at subsidized rates, and ability to participate in international fairs at discounted value. So just look up for Udyam, you'll come to know about benefits. But yeah, if you are registered, you are entitled to all the government schemes applicable to the place where you are, both state and central.
okay. Thank you,
Okay.
sir. So, Sir Shivam says that he is in delivery and logistics startup field. So, what kind of investors should they interact with? Means, is there a separate investor who invest in logistics?
Yeah, so Shivam, what you need to do is just there are websites which contain lists like Venture Intelligence, for example, or VC Circle of investors. There are certain users on Twitter also who provide this list of investors, and if you can send me a message, I can send that list to you also. So there are investors list which kind of give you an indication what sector these funds are focused on. So basically, you need to look at investors in the VC and angel space who are focused on logistics sector and approach them.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
there's
you,
one
sir.
more question by Navdeep. Navdeep actually has his own startup and he wants to know when is the right time to list our private limited? If we're at a pre-revenue stage, should we register ourselves or should we wait for a little hike up of our revenue and then apply for private limited?
So there's no requirement to incorporate your startup in case you are not wanting to raise external money. You could still work as a proprietorship or a partnership firm in case you are not wanting to raise money. It is only when you want to raise money then you need to incorporate your company as a private limited. And because investors don't put money in partnerships or LLP or proprietorships.
Right.
So, Sir Arnav Goel has another question. He asked that startups tend to saturate at some time. The growth sort of stops. So, how do you overcome that?
Well, again, that's a very open-ended question because again, this depends on which sector you are operating on and what are the challenges. It could be ecosystem issues, it could be internal issues. And that's why, as we say in risk, there are two kinds of risk. One is diversifiable and other is non-diversifiable. Non-diversifiable risks are external factors, like if your economy is doing bad, like when during COVID, there was a lockdown. What you could do about it? That's non-diversifiable risk. But if there is something within your organization, let's say your sales team is pathetic, you need to get rid of them and get a new set of salespeople and start delivering. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's relative.
And
I think,
there's
yeah, go
one
ahead.
last question that we'll take in the chat box. This is asked by Kunal Rajesh, and I think it's a question that a lot of us have. So, how much equity should one dilute while initial funding?
Again, there is one no single answer. I'll tell you because each startup is valued differently. Our intention is to kind of dilute as low as possible because you will definitely go for subsequent round. But typically, what happens is I'll give you a rule of thumb, and this is not necessarily that your investor will agree for it. If you are raising a less than $1 million, which is less than a 7 crores kind of, let's say we are raising 50 lakhs, 1 crore, and all that, ideally don't go for a very high dilution. And if that's the case, you better say no to that investor. By high means like 20, 25, 30%. Don't dilute more than 10%. It's a rule of the thumb. Okay, but if you are raising slightly higher around, let's say $1 million and all, then you should be okay for 15 to 20% kind of dilution, depending on the stage. Again, it is better that at that point of time you talk to an independent consultant or a valuer and take his advice.
Right. And also in the chat box, Kushagra has posted a form. Everyone, please make sure to fill that form.
Yeah, we'd love your feedback, everyone. So
Yeah.
There's
make
one
sure
more
you.
question. We can just
There's
take
one.
it if it.
Okay, so sir, that's Sagar's question. He says, what are the prerequisites and process to be benefited from the Delhi government startup policies, as you mentioned about the interest-free loans?
Prerequisite is simple. You should be DPIIT registered startup, and then you can go to Delhi government's website and find out where you can apply for all this. Because this is something which I found from the Delhi government's website only. Uh, I am not operating in Delhi. I am operating in Mumbai. I just searched up on the policies of Delhi government as far as startups are concerned, and I found it, and that's why I put it in the deck. But there's something called as Department of Industries, which is the nodal body for all state government startup policies. So similarly, Department of Industries in Delhi is the nodal body for all startup related policies. You can go to their website or Delhi government website and find out how to apply for these interest free loans and other stuff. But first, ensure you are a DPIIT registered startup. That's important.
Hello, sir. I have a question. Actually, I'm unable to see chat box. So may I ask a question related to my startup?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Please.
sure. Go ahead.
Uh, yeah, sir. Actually, it is said that it is not good to reach investors before. I mean, you can run your business, right? I mean, you have a good number of clients. You have good number of. I mean, you have good number of revenue. Then it is good to reach investors. So, I mean, I mean, we are in the initial phase of healthnomics. So, it is good to reach investors because our client acquisition cost is high and there are lots of expense. I mean, actually, we are not able to go further from our own savings. So, it is good to reach investors because in our industry, health and wellness, customer acquisition cost is high.
I understand. So, what you are saying is absolutely fine, provided you have a MVP or a prototype ready which can demonstrate. And if you have run some kind of a pilot in terms of typically what I advise such cases where the cost of acquisition high is high or there are high scale up costs, that you run pilot sample size, run pilot for 100 customers and demonstrate those numbers to investors, then they are interested. But if you have only a spreadsheet model, then they might not be interested. So there's no harm in going early also if you are facing challenges. As long as they see that you have done some groundwork, you have put in your money and hard work, that's okay. You can approach investors early also.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
There are, if there are any questions, we can take them up. Maybe just one last question. If not, then we can wrap up the session.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Yeah.
May I ask my question?
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. So, what are the key points that an investor will see when dealing with service-based startup?
Could you repeat that? Your voice was breaking.
Uh, is audible now? Hello.
It's breaking, Sagar. Either be a little louder.
Sir, what are the key points that an investor will see when dealing with service-based startup?
Okay, so services based, I'm assuming it's a technology based service because nowadays, if you say it is only pure services play, not many investors would be interested because scaling up is only leveraged via technology. So I'm assuming it's a tech based services. It could be a SaaS service, it could be anything else also. So what is important is how fast you're scaling, what is the stickiness of your client, because typically if your clients are sticking on and giving you recurring revenue, then your model is sustainable and scalable. How fast you are adding new customer, what is your cost of acquisition. If your cost of acquisition is moderate or low, then also it's a good thing because that kind of counts up to your gross margin. So all these numbers are important. And is the model replicable very quickly? Let's say you launch, typically all startups launch on a pilot or a regional level wherein they launch in their cities where they are incubated. But is this something which can be scaled up to a regional or a national level, so to say? So these are the factors which kind of drive. Obviously, they will also look at the team strength, whether your core founding team has complementary strengths, as I mentioned earlier, and what kind of market you are in, whether there are competitors. If there are no or very less competitors, then you stand a good chance. So all these factors make a difference.
Thank you, sir.
So we're almost 5 minutes over the time, so I think we'll wrap up the session now. Thank you, Mr. Srivastav, for that very informative presentation. I'm sure that all the founders and aspiring founders would have learned a lot of valuable insights. So
My
anything else
pleasure.
you'd like to add, Suhani?
Yeah, I was just saying the way sir you presented all of your ideas, all of the information to us was really nice. That stone soup and everything that followed, we really like that. So thank you for the insights, sir.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was great having you with us.
Bye bye. Thanks.